All right, guys, so here we have the next step of our project, and I have decorated mine a little bit more. I used some of the move tools. Remember, we used the move tool with a smaller brush size. Let me bring this up, but if I were to change the brush size smaller, I can go in and make these little waves here. So, for example, here, we increase my brush size a little bit, but I can pull these out to give a nice little scalloped effect, which is actually nice and decorative. So sometimes I'll leave it like that, but on this one, I'm not going to. So that's achieved with the move tool. So using the move tool and using a smaller brush size. Again, if you wanted to smooth out your little rings here, then you would use a larger one, almost like just kind of using a nice gentle curve to adjust the overall shape. So I did that. I added a little bit of design right here. I just went in and pulled this out, which also brings up another advantage I didn't really point out all that much. But when I created a separate layer with these ball decorations, I can now go in with, for example, the Inflate tool. And let me decrease my brush size a little by pressing S. But if I wanted to go in and add a little bit more here, I'm actually going behind this ball. So it's not disturbing the ball at all. And again, I can see that this is sort of distorting a little. So again, I would polymesh. I'm sorry, not polymesh, but dynamesh. So it's just a process of adding and refining and fine tuning. But now we need to add the bezel. I have some stones in my studio that I wanted to add. I know that usually I put about a 3mm or a 4mm stone on my rings. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and go to the subtool palette and let's add a cylinder which is going to represent the size of the stone. It will also be a little plug that we'll use to cut out the interior and create a seat for the stone. So I can see it here in the middle, but I need to resize this up. Remember that when we bring these primitives in, they're usually 2mm or 2 units by 2 units by 2 units. So in this case, we need to increase the size. I'm going to go ahead and use a 4mm size, so I'll double the size and then move it into position. So again, since we're working with multiple subtools, I want to turn on transparency, which is third from the bottom over here on the right. When I turn that on, it shows me that my little plug here is not the active subtool. So I can press Option or Alt and the Shift key, click on this, and it will reverse and allow me to isolate this particular piece. Now I'll go to the side and again hold the Shift key, so I'm looking directly on the side view of this particular ring. Now if I go over here to the side and go to the deformation palette, I can go ahead and use size to increase the size of this and double it, which will make it 4mm in diameter. The next step is to rotate this. So I could do it one of two ways. One, I could go ahead and use the move mode, switch to move, and then use the gizmo. That's the easiest. Or if you know that this is about the, say like the x-axis, I could come over to the deformation palette and rotate on the x-axis. So you would just make these guys inactive, turn on X, and then you could rotate if I got it right, and I did. So I'll undo and go back to the gizmo. But again, I'll click on this outer ring and then press the Shift key so it locks to different angles, and then I'll move this up into place. So here we go, and it'll show up right about here. Now the next step is to add the ring to this. So we want to use a primitive that is the ring, or the torus is what that's called. So we'll append and go grab the ring 3D. Again, this is in the middle down here. Should be in the middle, there it is. If I want to make it active, I can hold down Option and Shift and click on it and make it active. I'll need to rotate this around. Again, I'm looking at the side view, so using the Shift. So I'll click and drag and turn that so it's horizontal, and then move it into place. And once it's up here, I can then use the square to increase its size until it looks about right. So For example, here I might, oh gosh, that's actually pretty good. I want it to be about, so like right there, that plug is about halfway across the width or the diameter. So I want to increase that so it's a little bit inside of that. So you can see here a little bit inside, and that looks good. Now go to the side view, again use your shift, and I want to use this little rectangle here to drag this up and create a taller bezel, and then click on the arrow and drag down to push this down into place in the ring. And there we go. The next step is to subtract this little plug here from the ring. And to do that, we actually have to create a Dynamesh object out of this ring that we've been working with. I also need to move this plug into place. So let me go ahead and press Option or Alt and Shift and click on it. And now, since I have my gizmo still loaded, let's move this directly up. So it sits probably about right here. But this will create a nice shelf in our bezel that I can set the stone. And I'm using just a little cabochon, so it's got a flat back and it has a dome top. So this will work just fine. But I usually kind of eyeball it and it just sort of works. If you were more precise, you could actually measure your stone and figure out what this height needed to be. But I generally eyeball it and it works okay. So there we go. That should be good. Let's see. So the next step would be to convert this ring. We need to make it a little bit finer resolution and then create a Dynamesh out of it. So let's go ahead and choose it. So hold down Option and Shift or Alt and Shift and click here. Now just watch me for a second as I show you a way not to do it and then a way to do it. So the first thing you could do is go into your geometry palette, and you might think, well, gosh, I'm just going to convert this into a Dynamesh. I've got, let's say, a 128 resolution. I could use polish, and I can click Dynamesh. And when I do that, it takes a second, but it's now a Dynamesh, but it's not very smooth. So part of the problem here is it did create a nice mesh on it, but it did not hide this chunkiness. So let's undo. Now, if I look back at the poly frame, you'll see that it has a much coarser frame behind it. So the trick here is to go in and divide it. So I'll usually divide that twice, which gets it nice and smooth. I delete the lower and then Dynamesh. Now, if I go look back at this mesh, it's nice and smooth. We have a nice smooth surface, and this is ready to subtract the inner core from. So you could do it either way. You could just Dynamesh and then try and smooth it out, but the easiest way is to divide a couple times and then Dynamesh afterwards. Okay, so now that this ring is a Dynamesh, we can subtract the inside. So the trick here, I need to scroll up. I need to move this core below the ring over here in the subtool list. So select the ring and move these arrows, or use the arrows to move it down. Now we choose the second icon here. We have this, I call it the MasterCard symbol. The second one is a moon. So go ahead and select the moon from this little list. Now switch to the ring, because what's going to happen is we'll merge down and subtract this item. So it's important for the ring to be above. Now scroll to the bottom of the subtool palette and look for merge and choose merge down. And the first thing that happens, it's a little confusing, is that I think, oh my God, I just added these two pieces. If I look up here in the subtool palette, oh my God, I just added these two things. Well, the final step in this is to re-Dynamesh this object, and it will subtract the thing that you had the subtract icon on. So you can either click the Dynamesh button again or hold down Command or Control, draw a box out here on the side, and that will re-Dynamesh, and then you'll see that this is subtracted from the middle. So there is our bezel. All right, now if we turn off transparency, you can see the ring is coming together. But I put all this effort into these nice little scrolls around the bezel, and now they don't work. So the nice thing about having these as separate subtools is that I can then select the ring and go back in and adjust these. So I'll switch to my draw mode. I will choose the move brush with a larger size. And for the most part, I should be able just to drag these out. Okay, that worked just fine. If it's ever distorting something over here, let me undo and I'll show you another trick. I can hold down Command or Control and use my mask pen to mask some of this off if I need to, like that. Or the undo, I can use the mask pen, but under stroke, I can choose lasso. And lasso is really nice for this. But for example, I can hold down Command or Control, and then I just kind of draw a little line around this, and it will isolate that center area. So now I can use the move brush, and it won't change any of this. So again, I can come back in and adjust this. Maybe move that out a bit. And I like that. Then to clear the mask, you just hold down Command or Control and draw a little box. It did, because we had it masked off, there's a little booger right there, so we can decrease the size and then use the Shift key to soften that a little bit, so that looks good. So now I have a correctly sized bezel that has a nice little frame around it, and our ring is pretty good. All right, now that we have a bezel in here, it's time to add a fake stone so we can get a good rendering of this and show it to a client or see if we like it. So the next step is to append a sphere. So I'll just go find a sphere, not a polysphere, just a regular sphere, and select that and make sure that it's the one that's active. Now we'll do exactly the same thing we did before. We'll switch to the move mode, then we will bring this up into place. Again, you can increase the size, you can use your Shift key, whatever. If I grab onto this little yellow guy, I can increase the size here until it fits. That looks good, but it's sticking out too high. So then I go to the side and I can use the blue rectangle to squash this down and make more of a cabochon look. In fact, it could even maybe be a little tiny bit smaller, but that looks pretty good. So there is our fake stone. Now all that's left to do is to add color. So I'll switch back to the draw mode, and this is actually important because if it's not in the draw mode, it won't work. But make sure your sphere is selected, and then make sure up here that you have M for material channel chosen, because we're going to assign a material to this stone, and so this has to be chosen or it doesn't work. Now go back to the materials and choose Jelly Bean from the standard materials, but you'll notice that it changes the entire ring. So now go to the color menu and choose Fill Object. Switch back to the ring under the subtool palette, choose a metal, like so. Or maybe I'll switch to this other metal, and you'll see now that the ring has a stone that's colored and the ring itself is ready. All right, now there is one last thing to do before we're all done, but this is the part where you can see these little ball decorations. The ball decorations are, they're separate, so they're on a separate layer. So we're going to merge these together. So go ahead and click on the top one, and then make sure that the other ball decorations are below and merge down. And then we're going to merge these with the ring. So go ahead and click on the ring, and then again we'll merge down, but you'll just do that until everything is consolidated. Now the nice thing on this is that these ball decorations can still be separated even though the ring it's basically all in one subtool. If I turn on polyframes, I can see that there are multiple polygroups within the ring. So ideally, I might have made the ring all one polygroup, but I have these different ball decorations. So let's go ahead and see if we can do that. So let's turn everything off but the ring. So to do that, we will switch to the draw mode. So you'll hold down Command and Shift or Control Shift, click on the ball again, and you're left with the ring without those two balls. Anyway, now click on this one and it will remove that. Now all that's left is the ring. And so with the ring, we can then do a select all. So that could be a Command A, or maybe it's a Control A on a PC. So that makes it all masked. And now do a Command W or a Control W. And I might do that one more time. I'm not sure what the color was of the other ones, but if you keep doing a Command W, it will change the polygroup colors. Now to bring back the balls, I can hold down Command and Shift or Control Shift and click on the background, and you can see that those polygroups are there. The reason that I switched it from pink, I actually saw that it changed the ring to pink. And if it had been, we wouldn't be able to separate this decoration from it. So at this point, our ring is different polygroups that can be separated, but when we print, it should be fine. Now turn polyframes off and you can see the finished ring. Oh, there is one more step we'll do. You can see that the band is a little bit thick here. So what we'll be doing is creating a core, and again, we'll be re-dynameshing. Now to do that, I'll append another cylinder. Then we need to increase the size of the cylinder, which we can do in the move mode, and then just increase it. It's a little bit easier to see if transparency is turned on, because then you can see how much that overlaps, and that looks pretty good. But then the second thing is notice that this is chunky on the sides again. So we need to smooth this out. The best way to do that is to go to Geometry and divide twice, maybe 3 times, delete the lower, and now we have a very smooth cylinder. And make sure that this pretty much overlaps just by a hair, but then we'll move this down into place. We're going to come down just a little bit to thin out this ring at the very back. So that looks good. Now, just like before, what we're going to be doing is to put the cylinder below the ring. We need to move that up. So select the cylinder, move it up, right underneath the ring, and choose Subtract. Now, with the ring chosen, we will merge down. Of course, it's not showing, so we can turn the visibility back on. So we will merge down. And then we need to Dynamesh, but our Dynamesh level is very low here. So what I'll do to preserve the design, I'm going to increase the size of my resolution to 64 and hit Enter. Now, if I Dynamesh again, it says there's a mask that needs to be cleared, so I'll choose Command or Control, draw a box, and now Dynamesh. And there we go. And we just want to make sure that this is smooth. A minute ago I did this and it had a little bit of distortion to it. And this actually does have a little distortion. We can smooth some of that out. Okay, anyway, our ring now is pretty much done. And we can smooth some of this out. So if we go in here underneath, and we still have our symmetry turned on, so we can go back to our maybe clay sculpting and smooth some of this out. We can also soften these edges right here. Soften it even a little bit more. And I've noticed too, there's a little bit of distortion in here. So you can go in and smooth that out. But overall, the ring is pretty much done. Our fake stone is gone, but now that everything is merged together, you can see that this is maybe not real pretty. So again, we have our symmetry still turned on. So I'll zoom in. I can also see in here that needs a little smoothing. That might need a little smoothing. But here, I can take my brush or my pen, actually I'm using a Wacom, and I can blend this in. I could even add a little bit of material here. So I might use, oh gosh, you could use like a clay buildup as one. So you just put a little bit of material. If you needed less than that, you can go up and choose the intensity. So I might turn that down a little bit and maybe turn my draw size up and just put like one little strip of that there, kind of fill that in and then just sort of blend it in, but go really lightly here. What's nice about the pen is I can use just a little bit of pressure. You're just kind of like, oh, whoosh, like that, and then blend it in, and that will work nicely. So see, that's nicely blended into the design. And at this point, everything is pretty much together. I'm seeing a little bit of distortion. I'm not sure quite where that came from. Some of it could be this particular material. But if you want, you can go in and just start smoothing some of that out. Just press down the Shift key, smooth it. See some in here. Let's soften those edges. And if you want, you can even switch back to another material. This blue one's a really nice one, the matte dirty blue like that. And it helps you to see where there's some inconsistencies, but that is pretty much how to make the ring. You can go back in and adjust some of these things as well. Kind of soften this. These sharp corners are a little bit harder to cast. You'll have to, I always figure I'll knock them down anyway when I'm sanding the piece, but but for the most part, the more you can do up front, then the less work you have towards the end. Again, double check your design small just to make sure that it looks good. And I think that this ring is a winner. Oh, one more. Oh, I just see one more. This guy right here, I can tell that's going to be a problem. I could go in with another cylinder and subtract it, but let's see. Okay, I'll show you one more trick. On this one, if I wanted to get to this a little bit easier, I could also hide the back of the ring. So again, I'm rotating and using the Shift key, and we're going to use Command and Shift or Control Shift, and we're looking for Select Rect. When I click and drag over this area like this, it turns green, but remove your finger from the Shift key and press Alt or Option like that, and it will delete the back. What's nice about that is it's just temporarily hiding it like we did with the polygroups, but now I have access to the back a little bit easier to get rid of this. If I hold down Command or Control, it gives me the mask pen, and I can use the lasso or I can just go back to freehand. I want a little bit smaller draw size, but I might mask this off. Something like that. So what this will do is it allows me to go in and maybe subtract some of this material. And the way I'm going to do it here is with let's try clay buildup. And I'll use the Option or Alt key. I'm just going to try and eliminate some of that. But again, the mask is preventing me from going in and digging in too deep. Now I can clear the mask with Command or Control, draw a box, and go back in and start smoothing that down. So it's not perfect, but this will be good enough for the back of the ring. You can also sand that when you're finishing the ring, so that won't be as drastic. But now that that's done, we need to bring back the rest of the ring. We do that by holding Command Shift or Control Shift on the background, and it brings the rest of the ring back. So it's not truly gone. We just hid it momentarily while we worked on the ring. And so that is it for our little ring. I'll have another tutorial that I'll do where we go in and add the supports for printing. But I hope this is helpful, and happy ZBrushing.